All right, thank you so much. First and foremost, thanks for the invitation to be here today. It's outstanding. First time for me here in Budapest. Never been here before. It's a tremendous city, beautiful city. So before I start, I'm going to introduce myself as well. But just so we can clear out, how many here in this room runs OpenStack in production today? Show of hands. How many runs private clouds in production? Show of hands. How many runs public clouds? Good. We need to talk afterwards. The reason I say it is, first and foremost, I can introduce myself as well. My name is Daniel Gustafsson. I am the vice president of our business unit, which we call Compliant Cloud at City Network. City Network is a Swedish company. We're based in a small town in southeast of Sweden called Karlskrona. We're not that big of a company either in terms of staff. We're actually only like 45 employees currently, and so I want you to keep that in mind as I go through the presentation here. I'm going to talk about a little bit about our story, why we run OpenStack, what we do with it, and so on. But I also want to try to inspire you what you can do with OpenStack and why it's important that we have European providers in this world, not only the big conglomerate Americans. We need some competition. And we need something to work parallel with the big companies out there in the world. Okay, so why OpenStack? We actually started running a public cloud in 2009. We started out with a platform called Anomaly, which was more of a server as a service rather than an infrastructure as a service. We started early. 2009 was just a couple of years after Amazon has first launched in the US. We were the first public cloud in at least Scandinavia, I think Northern Europe as well. So we started early, and that was good for what it was. And then we started to realize we need to offer more to our customers. We need to have more services. We need to have better infrastructure service than we had at the time. So we started to look at all the available technologies out there. We looked at numerous, Eucalyptus, Cloud Stack, you name it. But we started to look at OpenStack early. And I guess we started a little bit too early, to be honest with you. At least not with testing. Testing is fine, but we decided to, what the heck? Let's show it to the world and see what we got here. So we started quite early, and we were actually on the Juna release when we published it live as an IES cloud, and we did actually over multiple data centers, over 3 data centers, 2 in Sweden and 1 in the UK. And the reason we did it was that we wanted to show off that there is something out there called OpenStack. It actually works pretty well. At the time, it was not built for public clouds at all, to be honest with you. It was really the private cloud type of installation, which we then forced into becoming a public cloud installation. Someone at our company called it horrible hackery, and that's exactly what we did. But we made it work, and it worked quite okay. So the reason why we decided to go with OpenStack is that we're absolutely convinced as a company that the time where one sole provider can own an entire infrastructure or entire servers or an entire delivery to a customer is over. It's too much to be done. The IT industry today is way too big. You have to be able to, as a company, as a customer, to cherry pick your services to function for what you want to do. We see it in the US already. We see it in Asia already. We're a little bit behind the curve ball here in Europe, but we're getting there. Slowly but surely, we start to leave the way we always done things, and we start to look forward to what we can actually do. And just take a look at whichever company you can think of. You have your Office 365s, you have your SAPs, and you have your infrastructure in your own basement, and you might use some sort of public provider as well. So that's your basket of goodies which you want to use. And we are actually absolutely convinced that that is the future. You have to be able to be working together with other providers as well. So your APIs need to function with other companies, other providers' APIs. If they don't, you're going to lock your customer to yourself, or you're going to be a deterrent for your customers because they don't want to use your services because they don't function with any other type of deliveries that they're already using. So in order for you as a provider to be successful, you have to be able to play with the other boys in the park, so to speak. You have to be able to adapt your services to whatever is out there on the market. So this is why OpenStack is a great option, because as you already know, almost all the APIs functions not only with other OpenStack clouds, it actually functions well with Amazon as well. So a couple of years in, we started 2013 when we launched OpenStack. And today we have 8 public clouds around the world. We have 5 in Europe, 2 in the US, 1 in Dubai, and 1 in Tokyo. We have 26 network points around the world, because I'm going to get to that later, but networks is extremely important to us. But we have 8 public clouds, and as Mark also mentioned earlier in his keynote, there's something called private cloud hybrids and multi-hybrids, and whatever you want to define them, we do that as well. So we have public and private clouds which we provide. So in total, we have 14 OpenStack clouds which we operate today, not only for ourselves, but also for private customers. So currently, we are on the Newton release, primarily. We're moving to Okata here in a short while, so it really depends on where we are in the upgrade cycle on those specific data centers. But this is what we actually have established in a very short time, from 2013 to today. So it also proves that OpenStack can be deployed quite rapidly. So all of these data centers and all of these OpenStack installations are integrated and communicating with each other. So you can sit in Sweden and launch a server in LA and never leave the proximity of City Cloud, which is our public cloud service. So all our data centers are connected with networks, and we want to offer not a replacement for any other providers, because we have customers today who use Amazon or they use Azure combined with us. And I thoroughly believe that that is the best redundancy you can have in terms of infrastructure. If you have one provider with multiple data centers, just as ourselves, the possibility of 2 data centers going down is there. And if we go down with 2 data centers, we have a problem. But if we and Amazon go down with a data center at the same time, then the world probably has a problem, right? So if you want to really build a true redundant infrastructure, why only use one provider? Use 2, 3, 4, depending on what regions you can you want to reach. Because we're not going to be able to build data centers in every country, in every corner of the world. And the same goes for Amazon. Would you know? The same goes for Microsoft. They're not going to do it either. But we could probably match our maps depending on which sites are more important to us and to them. So you as a customer can now cherry pick, once again, providers to reach the world the way you want to reach it, and the services have to be able to communicate with each other. So this is our ambition, and this is what we try to do. Excuse me. We also understood quite early that as a company, we need to be able to make a footprint in this community as well if we want to be able to do something. This is actually last year in Barcelona, as we were invited, I guess, as a gold member in the OpenStack Foundation, which we're extremely proud of. And we were by far the smallest company in that group that was invited that year. But the cool thing about it is that we had something to offer. And the reason why we also took that step is because we're all in OpenStack. This is what we do. Everything we do, no matter if it's private, if it's hybrid, if it's public clouds, it's OpenStack based. Everything that we do is OpenStack. So we just figured that, if we're in this, we're going to do it all the way. So this happened last year. That's actually Mark on stage doing his thing. So what we want to achieve with our infrastructure is the simple, I guess, message of OpenStack, that we want to be able to provide whichever type of platform that suits you as a customer. You should have the choice. We should never force you to pick a service or choose a service. You should have the choice of what you want to do. If you want to be able to just run our public flavors of the infrastructure, whatever we put out there, that's going to be good for you. But if you want to go all the way to the containers of the world and the ironics of the world and just run bare metal, you should be able to do that as well. So we're never going to hinder you in terms of running any type of specific service. We're going to focus on a couple of what we decide is core services within the OpenStack flora. But we will never hinder you as a customer. And this, I believe, is a bit of a unique selling point that we can actually provide. That our theory is that if we can rack it, then we can run it. So we're not gonna do this, force it down your throat and say this is the only thing you can do. So if you want to put a private firewall in our facilities, you're more than welcome. If you want to put your own type of storage, you're more than welcome. We're not going to stop you. We're going to have our base installation, which we will provide to you. But if you have any special requests, we can probably meet them as long as they function within the OpenStack world. So I put the next slide up for one simple reason. Because someone told me I should show some numbers. And quite honestly, this is just drawn out of a couple of data centers that we run up in Sweden. So it doesn't really tell you anything because we're a public cloud provider. So this changes every day, right? It depends on usage. It depends on if it's a Tuesday or if it's a Sunday, essentially. But these numbers are not that really impressive because you've seen the CERNs of the world and you've seen the Walmarts and the really, really big OpenStack installations, and they swallow enormous loads of traffic, right? You've seen them all, right? And we go ooh and ah about those numbers. And the reason why we go ooh and ah is because we're surprised. And what I want to try to tell you today is that we have to stop to ooh and ah about OpenStack because it really works. Because if you're surprised that it works, you're never gonna, you can't go in and say, okay, do we really gonna go production with OpenStack? Yes, you should, because it is now finally production ready. That's as I mentioned, we have already gone heads all in. It actually works. We see a lot of test environments and we see a lot of development environments and so on, and that's good because that's a brilliant tool for what you can use it for. But these numbers really don't tell you anything. It's just like, okay, so if it's a massive amount of data or a massive amount of workloads, great, it means it works. So the ooh and ah days of OpenStack is over, it works. So if you want to become a provider of any type of infrastructure or any type of cloud services today, depending on, no, it doesn't matter if you're on the infrastructure, PaaS, or the SaaS levels. Since we are an IaaS provider, we focus an enormous amount of time on the infrastructure and the networks. That's what's important for us. However, you need to find a niche, why you have a place in this world. Otherwise, everybody's going to tell you why. Well, at least they tell us. When we talk to our customers, why should we pick City Network over Amazon? Or why should we pick City Network over Microsoft? And we tell them that you shouldn't pick us over anything. You should choose us because we have something to offer. And in our world, it is security. We have focused extremely hard on security. That is really what has been our success story so far. We have launched already in Sweden, Sweden's largest insurance company, live production, and as you know, insurance companies has pretty darn tough regulatory aspects. We just launched a bank. Sweden's fourth largest bank is now running in production on OpenStack, hosted by us. That's the private cloud hosted by us, used by a customer type of deal. The insurance company is actually running, I'm going to show you a little bit later on a different slide so you can see what I mean, but it's actually running what we call a community cloud, which is a public cloud, which is restricted to a specific type of regulatory demand. And in this case is the insurance company's type of demands, which is solvency, the EU demands, if you heard of it, but they have a specific EU directive which they have to follow, and so on. So we decided that this is going to be the key for us to our success, and it really has been, because that actually sets us apart from the Microsofts and the Amazons of the world in terms of that, yes, they can give you some really good security features, but if you want to have a tailored solution just for you, hosted in the country which that specific bank, insurance company is based in, which is also important, I assume it's important here as well. It's extremely important in the Nordics. We're extremely picky where we put our data. So, if you're a Swedish insurance company, you want to stay in Sweden. You don't want to go anywhere else. Even though they actually can, they are allowed to actually host data in any EU country or the US for that matter. But it feels good, right? So we put an enormous amount of time into these, and this really has nothing to do with OpenStack. but it has everything to do with the fact that we can now host these types of companies in an OpenStack environment. We actually hold each and every one of these certifications. And this is also a selling point in terms when I talk to a bank, I say we're a company of 42, 45 people staff, right? And they look at us and say, well, you're not a company, you're a project. because they're like 500,000 employees, right? Then I say, okay, so how many of these do you have, dear Mr. Bank? And they maybe have 2 or 3 of these. So I can actually top them by saying, well, we have this. This is us, right? So I can actually make those banks and those insurance companies feel secure and safe within a cloud. So the whole myth that cloud is insecure is also dead. I always say good luck in your basement, because the cloud has a lot more. These, once again, Amazon's of the world, Google, they all have it. They all have these. So this is something you have to put time into. The reason why this becomes important for us, once again, is because we are in a European company, we're a European entity. So EU loves us. I spent a lot of time in Brussels. In my previous job, I worked in Brussels a couple of years. And they are super frustrated, EU that is, that there are not enough European companies that can compete with the American giants. And whenever a procurement is done within the EU, they're looking for European providers. That's the reason why you have a place in this world, such as do we, because we're European. And that is actually a selling point as well in terms of if we can host these types of services on OpenStack or any type of really cool infrastructure technology, and we can also provide the security, and we're also European, you're golden. So then that also gives you a unique selling point once again. This is extremely cool. So we put a lot of time into this. We actually have a session later on with our CSO, Kim Hindart, which is sitting over there. He's going to talk about the new General Data Protection Regulation. Heard of it? GDPR? Okay. If not, attend his session. It's going to hit Europe like a bomb next year, May. And it's going to turn everything on its head. And this is extremely important in terms of cloud services as well. So join his session later on. Okay, so what we also put a lot of time into the ability for our customers to connect their data centers and their infrastructure to us. Because we don't think, at least I don't, that we can just go into any type of company and say, you should go all cloud tomorrow. Just leave whatever you have in your basement today and just leave. It's not going to happen because of legacy, right? So if you want to have a transformation into a cloud, you have to help the customer to get to the cloud. And as we found anyway, the most simple tool is to make sure that they can connect their infrastructure to your infrastructure. And the cool thing with OpenStack is it doesn't really matter if they run VMware, Hyper-V, or whichever type of hypervisor or any type of infrastructure, because it works with OpenStack. The APIs are there, correct? So you can actually help a customer to transform into the cloud, if not with everything, but at least with a few of the services, to make sure that they get OpenStack enabled. And then you help them along the way, right? So it doesn't always have to be the private cloud in their basement. You can actually host a private cloud for them, or if you have, as we do, a public cloud, you want to try to transform them into a public cloud for the services that can actually run there. Make sure they can connect to your data centers and your industries. It's extremely important because that also takes a lot of stress off their shoulders. That okay, the cable from here to here is good, because then at least we know what we have here and we can use you for whatever which we want to test initially, and then they feel more comfortable with you as a provider, and lo and behold, you then have their production system in your data center with a couple of years. So this is essentially the business model which we have based our entire company on, and everything is based on OpenStack. We run, as I mentioned, the public cloud. We have roughly 2,000 something customers there today, primarily in the northern parts of Europe. As I mentioned, 8 public zones all connected together. We have our industry clouds, which is, as I mentioned before, the cloud that we set up, which we also call the community clouds for specific industries, bank, finance, automotive industries, whatever it might be. And we build clouds for that specific regulatory demand. So we have a bank cloud, we have an insurance company cloud, we have an automotive cloud, and so on. So you build silos. So any type of industry within those boundaries can then be placed in that specific type of community cloud with a higher security level than you have in your public cloud, and you can then attend to their security demands. And of course, we build the private clouds, which is just private clouds. And most importantly, banks almost always want to sit in a private environment. But the cool thing about it is that we can then connect all of these clouds, our public, our community, and our private clouds to talk to each other. So if you have a highly regulated industry who has been told that they can never run into any type of cloud services because the demands are way too high and their security is not good enough, you can actually then start to help them to separate their data, categorize their data. So you have the horrible data, the not so horrible data, and the public data. And then you can actually start to help them use the specific cloud which suits their need best, right? So this is also something we put a tremendous amount of time in. So this is how we build it. As I mentioned, everything is OpenStack based. Almost everything is on Newton. Currently, we have some Okadas installed, and we have some older versions as well. And also, feel free to interrupt me and ask questions. I should have said that early, but you should not be ranting here. If you have any questions, feel free. One of the also important things you need to think about if you want to have a place in this world as a provider of infrastructure in Europe is that it really, really helps to have a support based in your country or locally where you have your business. And that support should be reachable, meaning not only through an email or some sort of chat channel, you should be able to actually communicate with those types of support units that you have. Because as we have found out, the knowledge level of OpenStack is good in some places, not so good in other places, and non-existing in others. You need to be able to help your customers to be educated in OpenStack. As mentioned before, it's been a bit cluttery before. It's been a lot of projects. Some died, some moved on, some were merged into others, and it can be really confusing sometimes. So having a support and a local knowledge which you can spread to your customers is extremely important. We, at least here in the northern parts of Scandinavia, have found out that this is crucial because OpenStack it's worldwide, but it's very, very isolated in certain places. So you need to spread the knowledge, so to speak. So if you can have that as well, if you can muster it, it's great. It only helps your case. So what can you do then? As I mentioned before, we know that any type of industry out there is going to run some sort of cloud service within the next 5 years. If they don't already, they're going to. And also, I usually say that you need to be able to inform your customers that running clouds is not that horrible. It's not it's not that scary of a place. Because if you think about it, what really a cloud is, it's the next generation outsourcing. It's the next generation virtualization. It's the next generation of virtualization. That's really what it is. We decided to call it cloud because we wanted to tell the industry it's something new. You've never seen this before. And there's a definition of cloud as well. It should be a self-service portal. It should be a pay-as-you-go model. And it should be scalable, right? So that is actually the definition of a cloud. However, we need to be able to spread the wealth and spread the word about what cloud services really are and what the gains and benefits really are. And if you can get to that, it's going to help you tremendously. US, Asia is ahead of us. We need to speed along here, folks. We need to get Europe going because right now it's like a tennis match. We're looking at American software on Asian hardware, and in between it's us in Europe. We're almost only users here. We use cloud services. We really don't provide any cloud services. We need more of us. See? And what I'm trying to sell to you here is that it actually works. You can do it. It takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of madness. It takes some sort of a new thinker, so to speak, a CEO who really wants to spend a lot of money trying to get things going. But at least we need to do it because we need European providers. We cannot be dependent on the American providers on Asian hardware. It doesn't work that way. We need to start to produce something here in Europe as well. And OpenStack gives you a fantastic platform to do that type of innovation and new thinking. So I urge you to get going if you're not already doing it. I've made a survey of, we just look briefly on how it looks in Europe right now. We're essentially 5, maybe 6 cloud providers in Europe right now who provide some sort of open infrastructure IaaS service. And we're not even close to having like 2% of the market. So we need to get going here. We need to offer not an alternative to the American providers. Also, I saw a survey that 65% of all companies in Europe are still running their own hardware in their own data center. So there is a massive market to still get your hands on, right? So there is a place for a European provider. I hope I could show you that with this little short, brief presentation. We love OpenStack, of course. We think it's great. But I think the best thing with OpenStack is that it works with other types of platforms as well. You can actually provide a true vendor-neutral infrastructure, which is really, really good. And I think we have to move along that way forward. We can't have lock-ins. We can't force customers to pick a brand because we said so. The customer has to have the end decision of whatever they want to run, you should be able to provide, and it should work. And with OpenStack, that is to a very large extent true. So that's the reason why we did it. So is there any questions? We have like 5 minutes left before we're actually going to break this. So if not, I'm going to be here all day. I would love to talk to any of you who actually runs these types of services yourself or trying to or thinking about it. We're here to help, essentially. It's not competition, it's help. We need more of us. So as I mentioned, there's a large market to get your hands on, and would love to talk to you. So if not, I can take questions later, but I'll thank you for your attention. Have a great day.
Hi, my question is, what do you use for deploying this many data centers? So you have your custom built Ansible, Chef, Puppet scripts, and what are you using for monitoring this highly scaled OpenStack environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, great question. We use Ansible primarily. Really because that's the first thing we tested and we liked it. But it works. It would have worked with a Chef Puppet or whatever. We use Ansible primarily. We have an Ansible tower, and then we also have a variety of installations right now. We're a little bit clustered because we started with on CentOS, so now we're moving to Ubuntu. So we have a bit of a mixture. So we run MOS in a couple of data centers as well for the distributions. So it's a little bit cluttered, but Ansible primarily, and that's what we like. For monitoring, we use OP5 primarily, which is a Swedish monitoring company. They have a integrated solution for OpenStack, which I can highly recommend. It's also a partner of us, so if you want to get to know them, feel free to talk to us. But they're called OP5 at op5.com. So we use that for monitoring primarily.
Other questions? Anyone else? Okay, I have one. So you mentioned before that you are a really small company, yeah, but you are running a worldwide service. What kind of challenges you met with scaling out the company to for example, to Middle East and the other part of the world?
Right. Okay, so yeah, as I mentioned, we're like 45 staff, and we have our entire operations unit in Sweden. They're based in Karlskrona, the entire lot of them. We have our NOC everything. So we do all of our deployments from Sweden. which of course is a bit of an issue in terms of when we have a data center in the US, it's a long way to go. But we have facility managers which helps us out with the hardware, and hardware is almost always the one thing that you might need some help with. But with software, we run everything ourselves. We have no external help in terms of how the actual physical operations run. So when we established in Dubai just recently, we actually took a new step. It's the first time we tried to franchise a provider as well. So we have a local company in Dubai who helps us out, and they essentially use our brand, and then we run the operations in the data center and the OpenStack installations, but they run the actual sales bits and the trying to get the customers in and so on. So we actually the first time we franchised a company to help us out, and in certain types of markets that's the way to go, because if you don't have a local presence, it's very, very hard to get attention essentially, right? So we tried something new. We didn't have that in the US when we launched there, and we found out quite easily that it's tough to get your name out there. But also to understand that the reason why we spread out in the world is because of customer demand. So almost always it's European companies who wants a presence in the US or in Tokyo or in Dubai, which then not forces us, but it enables us to establish new sites on those types of regions. So it's almost always customer driven. Some are strategic from our side, but almost always it's customer driven. And it is for European companies who wants to stay with a European provider, but in Tokyo or in Dubai or in the US. So that's how we spread out.
Okay, and I see that a lot of companies using Amazon, AWS, and the others. And how do you compare your service with those? Because Amazon, I think it is the largest public cloud provider in the world. Why someone want to choose City Network?
Well, it's $1 million question, I guess. Well, we're never going to be able to compete with Amazon in terms of features. Let's just be honest with ourselves. And Google probably is going to have some more developers than we do. So feature-wise, they're going to be ahead of the curve, and we try to have the features that we feel is the most necessary for our customers. And as I mentioned before, the reason why you should choose City Network or any European provider of a public cloud is because if you are a European entity, you get a lot of gains from having a European provider. It helps you enormously, especially in terms of contracts and the negotiations and the legal bits. Because if you want to sue Google, you have to sue them in the US. So if you have laws in Europe which doesn't apply in the US, guess what? It's not going to work. So it's from a legal perspective extremely important. It's helpful, I should say, to have a European provider as well. But in terms of features, they're going to beat us every day. But we try to have the most sought after features. And also we're open to implement third-party applications. We don't have to develop everything ourselves. We're now looking at trying to set up a marketplace where we can bring in third-party applications which you can just click and run in City Cloud, and we don't have to know about it really. So if there's any brilliant third-party apps out there, we love them because it helps our development as well.
Thank you, Daniel, for the wonderful presentation. And I'd like to mention here that City Network will have another session during the late afternoon. And it will be about the GDPR and OpenStack relation. How can you configure your OpenStack to be GDPR compliant? And I think it will be the very hot topic of the next year and maybe this year. But I think that most of the people will get panicked during next year when this will be in effect. Yeah. Okay, so I think it is a definitive advantage for City Network. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks so much.